Glass cracked under Thalan's step. He stopped mid-stride and lowered a claw, dragging it over the cracked and overgrown stone lining the forest floor. Once upon a time they had been polished to a mirror's shine, reflecting the grandeur of his people. At least, that was what the historical records said. Now they were streaked with dirt and covered with moss. The interlopers were thorough. Thalan resumed his silent trek. He couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. Glancing up through the branches of the familiar yet not foliage, he saw the beams of light slicing through the early morning sky. That was the Planetary Defense Network. Their original builders had intended them to protect his own people from the threats of the universe, but for Thalan, all they did was prevent his fleet from reclaiming what was rightfully his. It was an eerily familiar situation that Thalan found himself in. It had been 3 years since that fateful night in the forests of the human homeworld, and much had changed since then. For one, the Venatorians were on the offensive again. 11 star systems, once controlled by the interlopers, had fallen to Thalan. All throughout the local bubble were news of the Venatorian invasion, and while there were wildly varying analyses of the motivations behind the conquest, most of which were wrong, all of them agreed on one thing, being that the series of victories all led up to this star system, Venator, the lost Venatorian homeworld. One thing that had certainly not changed from that night was how much he hated being the hunted instead of the hunter. Carefully, Thalan continued his slow prowl through the woods. A flicker at the edge of his vision was the neural interface implanted in his brain, notifying him of something. The implants were human technology, overlaying an interface directly over his vision. It prompted Thalan to bring up a live map of his surroundings. Red triangles blinked on the map, marking the last seen locations of his pursuers, provided by his ships in orbit. One of them blinked quickly, the most recent detection. A white diamond marked his own last detected location, and to his satisfaction, it was multiple kilometers behind where he currently was. The closest defense node for the array was marked as a star to the northeast. A third, blue marker, formed a triangle with his position and that of the node. Most of the red markers were clustered around his general area. A few were around the node, and none around the blue marker. Thalan continued forwards, silently dashing across a narrow creek and vanishing into the tree line on the opposite side. The white diamond blinked and jumped to where he had crossed the creek. Thalan cursed. If his own ships detected him, then the enemy's orbital infrastructure certainly could as well. 3 of the red triangles shifted towards his direction. Sacrificing a bit of secrecy, now that he was in a relatively thicker part of the forest, he sped up into a run, putting distance between the creek and himself. He glanced up again for a crack in the treetops. Faint chains of red streamed upwards from the ground-to-orbit railguns, intercepting the trajectory of the missiles headed towards the defenses. Whatever happened, he did not want to run into an interloper, but the universe had never cared about what he wanted. Thalan had spent much of his life studying, fighting, and destroying the interlopers from afar. The favor went both ways. He had watched as the interlopers first came out from the void, attacking ships indiscriminately, mercilessly. He had seen the news reports as the attacks grew more and more numerous. The name Minterloper was fitting, if one were to put their actions lightly. They came out of seemingly nowhere on their untraceable geometry drives. They would attack anywhere with an utter disregard for life, and they were everywhere that one looked. And yet no one knew where they came from, or where their homeworld was. Battle after battle he had fought the interlopers, until there had been too many to count. But this wasn't a battle. This was a hunt, and now, for the first time, predator and predator would meet face to face. His ancestors had failed once. He would not fail again. He continued through the forest this way for some time, always keeping an eye on the map, always on the lookout for any motion in the darkness of the trees, which was why it almost startled him when he suddenly found himself looking into the face of an alien creature. Fortunately, it was only a statue, lone and worn. It depicted an insectoid being of 4 eyes, a triangular head and a thin torso connected to a thicker, horizontal lower body. A robe that probably once looked regal flowed down its length. He recognized the being as a Sindari, The Sindari people were expert engineers and masters of fire. Once, in the early days of Venatorian history, they had walked on the surface of Venator alongside Thalan's own people. There had also been the Hylenids and Erylians, among others. They had been the Venatorians' closest allies. But that was before Thalan's ancestors had discovered the hostility of the universe they lived in. After the first RKKV attacks, the opinions of closest allies had morphed into greatest liabilities. Once inseparable peoples turned into tense competitors before fading into the background, never to be heard from again. Thalan had always thought that those early days, placing so much trust and dependence on a foreign people, had been a symptom of a young, inexperienced species. But more and more, he's come to think that maybe he was the naive one. The implant's notification flashed in the corner of Thalan's vision again. He brought up the map. None of the red triangles had gotten close to him, but with a startling realization he noticed a new marker, a rapidly blinking red triangle drifting ever closer to the blue marker. He couldn't let that happen. His paces quickened. The forest passed by rapidly, but his own icon on the map remained static. He could still be discreet while being fast. The two markers were close to the node, and as Thalan glanced up, he saw the beam of light growing closer through a gap in the trees. It was a tense half hour before Thalan slowed again. He had just passed the last detected location of the interloper, but the marker was a slow, blinking triangle. The trail had ended 15 minutes ago. It could be anywhere by now. It could be... Thalan felt and heard a twig crunch underfoot. It was louder than he would have liked. He stopped. A few groups of small avian animals took off from the treetops. The white diamond on the map jumped to his location, and a new blinking red triangle appeared, continuing the trail he had been following, except now it was going towards him. Thalan cursed under his breath, but then stopped. This was... fine. Good, even. Several more red markers appeared, heading towards his direction, but none of them were particularly close. Thalan turned and began moving in the direction away from the interloper that he had been following. For another half an hour, the map reported no new detections. The forest remained quiet. Thalan didn't like how quiet it was. He glanced once more at the beams of light slicing through the sky. "Come on," he whispered under his breath. "Any time now." A faint flicker of movement drew his eye, snapping into the shadows, before he let out a breath and brought up the map again, scanning for what had changed. Nothing. The map was exactly as it was before. Thalan's head snapped up to scan his surroundings, checking each and every detail, but whatever had caught his eye was gone without a trace. Just as he was about to take another step, a voice spoke directly into his head, making his blood run cold. "I know you're there." The voice seemed to ring from every direction. Thalan didn't respond, instead continuing to move away. "Why won't you come out? We can discuss terms for your surrender." A new red icon flashed on the map, barely 50 meters from where Thalan predicted his own location to be. Then another, in a completely different direction, and a third, fourth, fifth, and the map became covered with red strobing triangles dazzling his vision. He dismissed the map. "Get out of my head," Thalan muttered under his breath. He knew that the interloper could, at most, project sounds and images into his brain, but nothing more. "Oh, look at you, so confident. Why do you think you can win? Is it because you think you are oh so careful? That must be it. Do you realize that all it takes is one mistake for it to all come crashing down? One day you will lose." "Been there, done that," Thalan said. The interloper stepped out from behind a cluster of trees just 20 meters away. This one was a majestic creature, a gleaming white, streamlined body with 4 legs and a long neck and tail. A pair of bright yellow unblinking eyes seemed to gaze directly into Thalan's very being. Thalan glanced once more at the map. Nearly every interloper in the area was closing onto his position now, but the nearest ones had stopped a distance away. Watching. Waiting. He won't be able to go that way. In front of him was his opponent, with the oscillating light of the defensive laser looming behind it. "Oh, and one more thing. Unlike you, we don't make mistakes. Do you really think you can win?" With that, it charged. Tharlan hastily sidestepped the attack, claws swinging at the interloper as it shot past him in a white streak. His claws met nothing but air, but before he could react, the crash of a tree trunk shattering had him jumping out of the way of a second attack by pure instinct alone. He looked towards the direction the interloper had gone, but saw nothing. He raised his four-bladed limbs up, scanning his surroundings. On a hunch, he spun around, stabbing with a blade, just in time to catch an expanding patch of white. He watched as the creature impaled itself on the bladed tip of his back limbs, leaning forwards into the attack, just to stumble as his attack passed clean through, and the image of the interloper dissolved into thin air. His eyes widened, and he jumped, too late. The interloper crashed into him from behind, pinning him to the ground. He turned, bringing his four back limbs around to stab at his opponent. He hissed as pain shot through his limbs. He looked up. Two massive wings spread out from the back of his opponent, the sun catching on their sharp edge made of 1,000 blades. They were marred only by 4 smears of blood. His blood. His eyes widened as he saw the stumps at the end of his 4 limbs. The interloper opened his mouth and bit down hard on Tharlan's neck. As he opened his mouth to let out another hiss, he shut his eyes. This was all too familiar. Too familiar. And this time his opponent wasn't about to stop. This time was different. This time Tharlan had something he didn't have the last time. He just needed to hold on. His eyes snapped open and the blue sky filled his vision. "Mistake 1, Tharlan coughed out, "is leaving important infrastructure undefended." The interloper let up the pressure on Tharlan's neck and turned to glance back in the direction of the defensive laser. Nothing. The sky was clear except for a few wispy clouds. Tharlan slashed forwards with his claws, catching. "Mistake 2 is not keeping the enemy in sight." "How?" the interloper growled. "Why does your kind always find a way to win, no matter how insignificant?" He turned back to Tharlan and clamped his teeth further into his neck. Tharlan gritted his teeth. The map floated before his eyes, with the blue rectangle flashing near the center. "Mistake 3, he rasped, "is assuming your opponent is alone." A gunshot rang out through the forest, and the interloper let out a roar. With a heave of effort, Tharlan pushed his opponent off and rolled until it was pinned under him. He glanced in the direction that the gunshot had come from. A human stepped out from the shadows. "You all right?" Eliza asked. Tharlan gave a single nod. "We gotta go. Extract's gonna be here any time now." As if on cue, 100 flashes of light speckled the late morning sky. The radio receiver integrated into Tharlan's neural implant cracked to life with the sound of a confident, commanding voice. "This is Captain Harrison speaking on behalf of Sol Expeditionary Fleet Command, and behind me are 130 of humanity's most resilient ships, equipped with the best Venatorian geometry drives and the deadliest of Sindari weapons. Beside them are a combined force of almost 200 ships from the Hao Collective Interstellar Fleet and the Aurelian Space Corps. To those trying to keep this star system from its rightful owners, we urge you to leave, or be destroyed." For the first time ever since landing on Venator, Tharlan knew that everything was going to work out just fine. He looked down at the interloper struggling beneath him, his pristine white form now streaked with his own blood. "You want to know why we always win? It's not by being careful. After all, it only takes a single mistake. And my last one taught me a concept that you never learned. Friendship. That is why we win."